The storm above the desert had just passed, leaving behind a red sky and thick smoke rising from the cracked earth. Lieutenant Marcus Rain walked carefully over broken metal and black sand, his rifle ready, his boots sinking into the soft ash. A smuggler ship had crashed here only hours ago, and command said it was empty, no survivors, no signals, just wreckage. But Marcus didn't believe that. He had seen strange heat readings, movement under the twisted hull, like something was still alive in there. And now, as he stepped into the dark belly of the ship, he felt that someone was watching him. "Scanner's dead," he muttered, checking his wrist tool. No lights, no sound, just metal groaning in the wind. He moved deeper, stepping over a crushed cargo crate, then stopped when he heard a sharp breath, too close, too fast. Suddenly, something moved, a flash of motion from the shadows. A sharp blade swung at his neck, fast and silent. He ducked, just in time, falling hard on his back as a figure jumped out of the darkness. Before he could aim, a small but fast body was on top of him, a knee pressing his chest, a cold knife at his throat. It was an Elena girl, maybe his age, with sharp silver eyes and skin marked with thin glowing lines. Her breathing was rough, like she'd been running or bleeding, or both. He grabbed her wrist before the blade could press deeper. Using all his strength to twist and roll, they hit the floor hard, metal clanging around them, and he pinned her under his knee. Gun raised to her head, dropped the blade. Marcus shouted, breathing heavy. She hissed something in her own language. The blade still in her hand, but her arm was shaking now, her eyes full of pain and fear. Then she collapsed, the knife clattering to the floor, her body limp under his weight. He looked down at her, chest rising weakly, blood dripping from a wound just under her ribs. Still alert, still dangerous, but dying. He picked her up carefully, her body light but tense, and carried her out of the wreckage to his camp, not far away. As he walked, she opened her eyes once and stared at him, then passed out again. Back at the camp, he placed her on a bedroll, quickly tied her wrists with cuffs, and cleaned the wound. She woke up when the cold touch of antiseptic hit her skin and kicked him hard in the chest. Marcus fell back, surprised by her strength. "Easy," he growled. "You try that again, I'll leave the knife in next time." She didn't speak, just stared at him with cold silver eyes, like he was the enemy. He grabbed a packet of emergency rations and tossed it toward her. "You want to die? Fine, but don't waste my time." No answer, just silence. Hours passed, the night grew colder, and she didn't eat or drink. She just sat there, hands cuffed in front of her, watching the fire but never warming herself. Marcus tried again. "Who are you?" he asked. "What were you doing on that ship?" "Nothing," he sighed, sat back, and looked at her through the firelight. "You know, I was told the ship was empty, that nothing survived the crash," he said. "You proving them wrong just made my job a lot harder." Finally, she spoke one short sentence, voice rough but clear. "You should have let me die." Marcus stood up, walked to her, and crouched in front of her, his voice cold. "What the hell am I supposed to do with you?" She looked up slowly, her lips pale, but her voice stronger now. "Kill me," she said. "Or run, human." Then she leaned closer, her eyes glowing just faintly in the firelight. "They're coming." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "Who?" She didn't answer, just stared into the fire, far in the distance. The night wind howled through the wreckage, but mixed in with it a strange sound, not the wind, not the storm, something else, something hunting. Marcus looked out into the dark, and for the first time he felt it too. Something was out there, and it was getting closer. He looked back at the alien girl, now lying weakly against the wall, her arms still chained. She had been ready to kill him, and yet she warned him. He didn't know who she was or what danger she brought, but he knew one thing: he couldn't leave her behind now. Marcus didn't sleep that night. Not really. The fire crackled low in the cold wind, casting flickering shadows across the ruined shelter walls. The alien girl, still cuffed, had barely moved, her breathing slow, her silver eyes closed like she was unconscious. But Marcus didn't trust it. She had already tried to kill him once, and she moved like someone trained to kill again. He sat with his rifle on his lap, watching her, waiting for her to speak or attack. She did neither. Morning came slow, the sky outside pale with rising ash from distant fires. He stood, stretched his sore back, and walked over to her, offering another ration pack. She opened her eyes and looked at him, but said nothing. Her face was blank, unreadable, like she didn't care whether she lived or died. Marcus crouched, holding out the water pouch, still not talking. He asked, "Fine, you'll break first." She blinked slowly, then turned her head away. The cuffs around her wrists made small clinks as she shifted slightly. Her body was weak, but her will was solid. He sighed, stood up, and turned his back. For a moment, walking toward the scanner that still didn't work. "Great," he muttered, smacking the device. Still nothing behind him. He heard a quiet shuffle, a breath held too long. He spun around and raised his weapon, but she hadn't moved far. Just sat up straighter, arms still locked, her face now sharper awake, alert. Watching him like a cornered animal, Marcus stared at her, feeling a strange weight in his chest. She didn't look scared, not anymore. She looked ready. He walked back toward her and sat on the ground across from her, his eyes narrowing. "You knew someone was coming last night," he said. "You warned me?" She didn't nod. "Didn't speak, so why'd you do it?" He asked. "You hate me? You wanted me dead?" She didn't respond. The silence stretched, heavy and awkward. Then finally, she spoke, her voice soft, dry from thirst. "If they find you, you die, Marcus." Raised an eyebrow, but not you. She shook her head slowly. "I'm already dead." He studied her face. The thin scar running from her jaw to her collar, the faint bruises on her arms, the tired eyes that still watched everything. She was hiding more than pain, more than fear. She was hiding truth. He tossed her the water pouch again, and this time she caught it. Slowly, she sipped, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Her hands were shaking slightly, but not from weakness, more like tension. Marcus leaned back, resting against the wall. "You got a name?" he asked. She hesitated, then said Celira. That was all she gave him, but it was a start. He repeated it softly. Celira. The name didn't sound like the ones from bounty lists or criminal files. Too soft, too ... royal. Later that afternoon, a small sound echoed from outside. Marcus froze, pressing his ear to the metal wall. It wasn't wind, it wasn't a storm. It was a drone, flying low, scanning, humming through the sky like a metal hornet. He grabbed his gear and moved quickly, pulling Celira to her feet, removing the cuffs but keeping her hands tied. "We're moving," he said. "Now?" She didn't resist, but she didn't help either. They ran through the ash fields behind the bunker, into the edge of the canyon wall where heat signatures were harder to track. The drone buzzed overhead, circling but not locking on. They waited in a cave for hours, silent, breathing in dust and holding still like prey hiding from a predator. When the drone was gone, Marcus finally turned to her and said, "Someone's looking for you." Celira closed her eyes for a long moment, then whispered, "Everyone is." He stared at her. "Why?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, like she was deciding something heavy, something dangerous, but all she said was, "Because I'm not supposed to exist anymore." Then she turned her face to the wall and said, "No more." Marcus sat there, watching her, his chest tight with questions. He had thought he was dealing with a common smuggler, a fighter maybe, or a thief. But this girl Celira was something else entirely. And now with bounty drones searching the skies, and her hiding deadly truths behind silence, he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was a trap he'd already stepped into, and the only person who could explain it refused to speak. The sky was blood orange when the signal came through. Marcus had been scanning old Alliance channels just to kill time, expecting nothing. Maybe a weather update or salvage alert, but instead, the transmission broke through like a scream across. Static, a loud tone, then a cold voice, male, firm, emotionless, subject Celira, Colin identified. Keleth Royal Fugitive, alive, last confirmed coordinates marked. Bounty increased 2 million credits. Dead or alive, Marcus stared. At the screen, frozen, his eyes locked onto the image that followed Celira's face, flickering on the display. The same silver eyes, the same thin scar, but in the picture, she wore royal robes and a chained collar around her neck. Not a criminal, not a soldier, a royal. Hunted by her own people, Celira stood behind him, staring at the screen like it was a ghost. She didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't even breathe. Marcus turned to her, and for the first time, she looked defeated, not scared, not angry, just tired. He didn't know what to say, and for a long moment, neither did she. Is it true? He asked softly. She nodded. Once, slow and sharp, like it hurt her to admit it. I was the second heiress, she said, voice like ice. My brother was killed. I refused the crown bond. I ran. Marcus tried to understand the words, but they didn't all make sense. What's a crown bond? He asked. She looked away. Marriage to the general of the Imperial fleet. Marcus blinked. You were supposed to marry a warlord? Yes, she said, her eyes hard, and become a puppet for the throne. She didn't say what happened next, but Marcus guessed. She refused. She escaped. She stole something powerful, something they would kill for. And now, they were coming. And she was worth more dead than alive, suddenly. A sharp noise outside cut through the silence like a blade. A low hum, a short burst of static, followed by the distinct worry of hoverjets. Marcus jumped to his feet, pulled Celira back from the window, and peeked out through the broken panel in the wall. A black ship hovered silently just above the rocks. Not Alliance, not Keleth, it was mercenaries. He swore under his breath. Grabbing his rifle, we have to move. Now, he said. Celira nodded. Pulling a small silver disc from under her sleeve. What's that? Marcus asked. She tapped it once, and it expanded, forming a glowing energy blade in her hand. My answer to them, she said calmly. The ship landed, kicking up dust, and 3 figures stepped out, armed, masked, moving like predators. Marcus and Celira slipped out the back, taking the canyon trail that curved behind the cliffs. But the mercenaries were fast, too fast. A sniper shot rang out, hitting a rock just inches from Marcus's shoulder. They ducked behind cover, pinned between high stone walls and enemy fire. Celira looked at him, her eyes steady. They want me, she said, not you. Marcus glared. Too bad. They'll get both of us dead or in pieces, he tossed. A flash grenade around the corner, and the explosion gave them 3 seconds to move. They ran, boots hitting hard rock, dust choking their throats, lasers burning the air behind them. One of the mercenaries chased on foot, closing fast. Celira turned suddenly and slashed with her energy blade, the merc's weapon falling in pieces as sparks flew. Marcus fired a clean shot into the second attacker's leg, dropping him cold. The third one yelled something in Keleth, but Marcus didn't wait to translate. He fired twice more and kept running. They didn't stop until the ship exploded. Behind them, flames rising high as Celira activated a small device she'd planted during the escape. Marcus looked at her, breathless. sweat dripping down his face. "You had a bomb ready this whole time." She gave a small shrug. "I had a feeling." He stared at her, unsure whether to laugh or curse. "You're unbelievable," he said, "and you're in too deep." She replied quietly, "You could have turned me in, taken the credits." Marcus shook his head. "Yeah, but I don't work with monsters." She stared at him for a long second, her face unreadable. Then she said something that made his blood run cold. "They won't stop, not until I'm dead. Or back in chains." And in that moment, he realized this wasn't just a runaway princess story. This was a war, and he had just chosen a side. Asterisk, they didn't stop running until their lungs burned and their legs begged for rest. The trail led them into a long-forgotten mining shaft deep in the mountains, hidden behind layers of stone and silence. It was narrow, damp, and filled with the sharp smell of metal, dust, and rot. But it was safe for now. Marcus lowered his rifle and sat against the wall. Sweat soaking his shirt, Celira stood near the entrance, blade still glowing faintly in her hand, her eyes sharp and alert. She hadn't said a word since the explosion. Neither had he. The silence between them was no longer awkward, it was heavy, like they were both waiting for the next nightmare to begin. "I didn't plan to drag you into this," she finally said, her voice low. "You didn't," Marcus replied, wiping blood from his brow. "I walked in myself." She looked at him, studying his face, as if trying to understand why. Then she sat down across from him and asked, "Why are you helping me?" The question hung in the air for a while. Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened his pack, pulled out a small light beacon, and set it on the ground, letting it fill the dark tunnel with a soft white glow. He looked at her, at the way her hands still trembled just slightly, at the burn on her arm from the merc shot, at the cracked edge of her voice. "Because," he finally said, "I've seen monsters before, and you're not one of them." Celira looked away, her jaw tight. "You don't know what I've done." "I don't care," Marcus said. "I know what I've seen." "You could have killed me when I attacked you," she whispered. "You should have." "But I didn't," he said. "And that means something." The tunnel grew quieter, and for the first time, Celira let the blade vanish from her hand. She leaned her head against the cold wall and closed her eyes. "I was forced into the bond at age 16, she said, almost too soft to hear. It was a ceremony, public, televised, forced smiles and blood ribbons. I was supposed to be a symbol of peace." Marcus watched her silently. She kept talking, as if now the words couldn't be stopped, but the general I was to marry, he was not peaceful. She continued, "He killed my brother, then said I was next unless I obeyed. I escaped with help from someone close. Someone I loved." She paused, breathing harder, eyes wet. "They killed him in front of me." Marcus clenched his fists, rage creeping into his chest. Celira opened her eyes and stared directly at him. "I didn't just run away," she said. "I took something." "What?" Marcus asked, leaning forward. She reached into a hidden pouch on her waist and pulled out a small black cube about the size of her palm. It glowed dimly, lines of shifting code pulsing across its surface. "This," she whispered, "is a fleet override key." Marcus's eyes widened. "That can control ships. It can shut down an entire battle group," she said, "including his." He stared at the cube, then back at her. "You could start a war with that." "I could end one," she said, voice full of fire. Before he could say anything more, the beacon on the ground blinked red. Motion detected. Marcus stood instantly, weapon raised. Celira turned, blade in hand again, her face cold and ready. They listened, breath held, as soft footsteps echoed from deeper in the tunnel. Not mechanical, not mercenaries. Voices followed, speaking in a tongue Marcus didn't understand, but Celira did. Her eyes widened slightly, and she grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "It's not bounty hunters," she whispered. "It's Keleth Royal Guard." They tracked the cube. Marcus looked at the entrance, then back at her. "Do we run again?" Salira shook her head slowly. "They'll catch us before we reach the surface. So what then?" he asked. She pressed the cube into his hands, her eyes serious. "If they take me?" "Don't follow," she said. "Take this and run." "No," he growled. "We do this together. You'll die," she said. "I'm not worth your life." Marcus leaned close, staring into her eyes. "Then maybe," he said, "you're worth even more than that." The shadows grew closer, footsteps louder. They had seconds left, maybe less. And Marcus made his choice. He pulled her behind him, raised his rifle, and whispered, "Let's make them regret chasing you." The cave lit up with red light as plasma bolts struck the walls around them. Rocks shattered, sparks danced, and the sound of shouting voices echoed through the tunnel. Marcus didn't flinch. He dropped to one knee and fired 3 shots in quick bursts. The tunnel was too narrow for both of them to fight side by side, so Salira vanished into the shadows behind him. Moving with silent steps like a ghost, the first guard who stepped into view didn't get a chance to shoot. Marcus hit him in the chest, armor cracking from the blast. But there were more too. No, 3. Moving in formation. These weren't ordinary hunters. They were trained, precise, and they knew who they were after. One of them shouted something. In Keleth, Marcus didn't understand it, but Salira did. She appeared behind the last one like a shadow from the dark. Her blade hummed to life and sliced through the soldier's knee joint, dropping him instantly. The others turned too late, caught between gunfire and steel. When the fight ended, 5 bodies lay motionless in the dust. Marcus stood still, breathing heavy, blood dripping from a cut above his eye. Salira lowered her blade, her hair sticking to her face, her eyes wild but focused. It was quiet against just breathing, just pain. "We have to go," she said, already moving. "Where?" Marcus asked, still watching the tunnel. "To the edge of the mine," she replied. "There's an old transport bay built into the cliff." He didn't ask how she knew. He just followed, because somehow she always knew where to go when. Things turned deadly. They moved fast. Deeper into the mine tunnels where no sunlight reached, the air grew thick and hot, and the silence carried weight. Marcus finally asked what had been burning in his mind. "Why do they want you dead so badly?" Salira slowed, her voice soft. "Because, if I survive, I can bring down their empire." He didn't respond right away. He just looked at the cube in his pocket, glowing faintly even now. It held power. He understood that, but he didn't know the cost yet. And Celaruche wasn't just a girl on the run anymore. She was something more dangerous at the end of the tunnel. They reached the old transport bay she spoke of. The giant doors were rusted, but the emergency control still blinked green. Salira moved to it, entered a long string of commands in her native script. The doors began to creak open with a loud groan, metal protesting after years of silence. Beyond it was an old cargo platform, half buried under dust and sand. And above them sky, wide and open, stars starting to shine through the fading light. It felt like freedom, but it wasn't. Not yet, as they stepped out onto the platform. A sharp whistle broke the quiet. Marcus turned, just in time to see a figure standing on the upper ledge above them. Not royal guard, not mercenary. Someone else tall, dressed in red armor with a flowing black cape, his face covered, but his voice cold and familiar to Salira. "I warned you," the man said, voice deep and cruel. "You belong to me, princess." Salira froze, her body locking up with fear Marcus hadn't seen before. Not when she was bleeding, not even when bounty hunters cornered them, but now she looked like a child about to drown. Marcus aimed his rifle at the figure. "And you are?" The voice laughed, hollow and sharp. "General Varric," he said, her intended. The name hit Marcus like a punch. The same general who killed her brother. The same one who ruled half the Kelith fleet. He had come personally, not to kill her, but to take her back. Salira stepped forward, shaking but brave. "I would rather die," she said. Varric tilted his head. "That can be arranged." Then, without warning, a missile launched from above, streaking toward the platform. Marcus grabbed Salira and pulled her back just as the blast hit the edge of the structure. Metal exploded, heat roared around them, and the whole bay shook like it might collapse. Smoke filled the air, and Varric vanished into the fire above, but his voice remained, echoing through a loudspeaker. "You can't run forever, Salira. I will find you again." They lay in the dust, coughing, heartbeats racing. Marcus rolled onto his side and looked at her. "Are you all right?" She nodded, barely, but he could see it now. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of going back, and Marcus had just made a quiet promise in his heart. He wouldn't let that happen. Not while he could still fight. Asterisk smoke still curled. Around the broken platform, the air was hot and bitter, thick with dust and burnt metal. Marcus pulled Salira behind a fallen beam as the remains of the transport bay creaked above them. Everything was falling apart, but he wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. She clutched her side, blood seeping through her torn clothing. And he realized how bad it was. Too much running, too many fights. And now she was bleeding out. "Stay awake," he said. Pressing cloth against the wound, "Don't close your eyes." Salira winced but didn't scream. She stared up at the stars above, her voice faint. "Why are you still helping me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he wrapped the cloth tighter. Ignoring her trembling, then he said, "Because someone has to." She gave a weak smile. But it didn't reach her eyes. "You should have left me when you had the chance, too." "Late for that," Marcus muttered, pulling her arm over his shoulder. He helped her stand, step by step, and guided her toward a rusted ladder that led out of the collapsed bay. Each rung creaked dangerously, but they climbed anyway. When they reached the top, the wind hit them like a slap, cold and full of sand, and across the rocky landscape. Far in the distance they saw lights, a signal flare, faint and blue. Someone was calling for help. Marcus narrowed his eyes, then adjusted his visor. "It's not Varric," he said. "It's a distress beacon. Low security, probably scavengers." Salira coughed, her voice raw. "If it's friendly, we need them. If not, then we fight again." He nodded, already moving. They had no time to waste. It took 2 hours to reach the signal, and by then, Salira could barely walk. Marcus carried her the last 100 meters, ignoring the ache in his legs, the pain in his back. She was light, like a flame about to fade, and he refused to let her go dark. The signal came from an old med station, half buried under stone. Run by survivors who'd escaped the war, humans, ex-aliens, ex-everything people who'd seen enough blood to know when someone needed saving. They didn't ask questions, just moved fast when they saw the girl in his arms, within minutes. Salira was on a table, machines humming, scanners blinking red and yellow. Marcus stood by the door, refusing to leave even when the doctor told him to rest. Time blurred. He didn't remember falling asleep. But when he opened his eyes, the doctor was standing next to him. "She live," he said, barely. "But she'll live." Marcus let out a slow breath, the kind that feels like you've been drowning too long. He went to her room, quiet, careful, and found her sitting up, weak but awake. Her silver eyes met his, and for once, it didn't look angry or guarded, just tired and thankful. "You stayed," she whispered. "Always," he said. Sitting beside her, she looked away, hiding her face behind her hair. "I've lost everyone who ever protected me," she said. "Every person who tried, died." He reached out and gently touched her hand. I'm not planning to die anytime soon. She didn't pull away, not this time. But the moment was broken by a sharp tone from the cum unit in the hallway. Marcus stood quickly, hand on his weapon. A voice came through static. At first, then words. Message for Salira Collin. This is Keleth Command. Your bloodline has been erased. You are stripped of title, protection, and citizenship. You are now declared a rogue species. Salira closed her eyes slowly. Her face calmed, a single tear slid down her cheek. She didn't scream, didn't cry out. She just whispered, "Now I really have nothing left." Marcus sat beside her again, his voice rough. "You have me?" She turned to him, confused, surprised. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "You don't need a crown or a fleet or a title. All you need now is a reason to fight back." Her fingers closed gently around his, and in that silence, something changed. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was war with purpose, with pain, and with two people who refused to surrender. The sunrise painted the sky gold and red as the old Met station fell silent. Salira stood at the edge of the cliff, just beyond the outpost, wrapped in a loose black coat, the wind catching her silver hair. Her wounds had healed mostly, but inside she was still bleeding. Marcus stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes scanning the far horizon where warships were rumored to rise again. Neither of them spoke for a long time. But the silence between them was no longer empty. It was shared, like everything else they had survived. "They erased you," he said finally. "They tried," she replied quietly. "But I'm still breathing." Marcus pulled the cube from his jacket and placed it in her hand. Its glow had faded since the last battle, but its power remained. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. She nodded, eyes hard now, the fire in her heart burning again. "If I run, they'll keep chasing," she said. "If I fight, maybe others like me will stop running too." They had gathered parts, weapons, a ship barely held together. But it flew. The Met station crew offered supplies, a map, and one final warning. "If you're going where we think you are, don't expect to come back." Salira had only smiled. "I'm not going back. I'm going through." Their destination was a fleet outpost deep in Keleth territory, a place Marcus never expected to return to. But with Salira, nothing was expected anymore, and deep down, he knew this wasn't about revenge. It was about ending something old and starting something new. When they reached orbit, the sky lit up with scanners, warnings, and auto-lock systems. Their ship was hailed immediately. "Unidentified craft. You are entering restricted space." Salira didn't hesitate. She answered. In her own language, her voice strong. "This is Salira Collin, daughter of the forgotten bloodline. I bring the truth and the end of your silence." Then she activated the cube across the command networks of the fleet. Systems glitched, lights flickered, power dropped, engines halted, cannons powered down. And targeting systems rebooted to nothing. Dozens of warships, blind and frozen, floating powerless in space. Salira stood in the cockpit, watching the chaos. "This is not surrender," she said into the open channel. "This is freedom, and I am taking it back." The fleet didn't fire, they couldn't. But on one ship, General Varric watched from the shadows. Lips twisted in rage, he slammed a fist against the console. But the controls stayed dark. He had underestimated her. He wouldn't again. "Let's go," Salira said. Turning to Marcus, he raised an eyebrow. "That's it." "That's the start," she replied. "I don't want to rule, I just want to give others the chance to escape, like I did." They jumped into hyperspace, leaving the frozen fleet behind. No titles, no armies, no crowns, just two fugitives who refused to be erased in the quiet of the stars. Salira finally let out a long breath and looked at him. "You never asked what you get for all this," she said softly. Marcus smiled. "I figured staying alive was enough." She leaned closer, eyes shining now, not with pain, but with something warmer. Then you're about to get more than you asked for. And as the stars stretched around them, two broken souls became something stronger, something unstoppable. Not a princess and a soldier. Not a fugitive and her protector, but something new the galaxy hadn't seen before. A future born in fire, carried by trust, and armed with hope.